morning and welcome to the program. You're watching our mid-morning edition of Arirang News on this Thursday, May 7th, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Shin Se-min. Before we begin, these are the stories we're following at this hour. South Korea's finance chief says the government will allocate $1.2 billion to help temporary workers who have lost their jobs due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The nation's job market and economic growth are expected to take substantial hits this year. The European Union predicts the bloc will contract 7.4% this year in the worst economic shock since the 1930s. It says the pandemic is driving the bloc into a deep and uneven recession. Plus, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says Washington can't be certain of the origin of COVID-19. This as the WHO says it's waiting for a green light from Beijing to send a team into Wuhan. South Korea's finance chief says the month of May will be a golden time for the South Korean economy to start recovering from the COVID-19 crisis. Speaking at an emergency economic council meeting this morning, Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi said the government plans to pour all its efforts and means to prepare for life post-pandemic. Now, that includes unveiling a Korean version of the New Deal that focuses on creating a digital-based job market and speeding up the digitalization of the economy. In addition to providing around $410 each to some 930,000 freelancers in South Korea, the government will soon allocate its third COVID-19 related supplementary budget and set its economic roadmap for the second half of this year. We all know by now that the coronavirus is greatly impacting economies all around the world. The European Union, home to some of the hardest hit countries like Spain, Italy, and France, is facing a financial crisis comparable to the Great Depression close to a century ago. Our Chang Tae-hyun reports.
The European Union revealed what everyone had been expecting Wednesday, that its economic forecast is intensely grim. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused economic activity in EU to drop by around a third since the onset of the outbreak and resulting mass lockdowns.
It is now quite clear that the EU has entered the deepest economic recession in its history.
The European Union predicts its economy to contract 7.4% this year. The COVID-19 outbreak has impacted nearly all economic sectors and has caused unemployment to skyrocket. The EU anticipates its jobless rate to surge from 6.7% in 2019 to 9% this year.
Unemployment is set to increase, though policy measures should limit its rise. The impact of the pandemic will be felt on the labor market.
The commissioner said there will be more job losses, but member governments and EU institutions will work on policy measures to cushion the damage. The 27-nation bloc will experience different levels of economic shock depending on the respective member nation's situation, like the period of lockdown and their financial status. Italy and Spain, two of the hardest hit EU countries, are forecast to experience the most intense economic struggles since their unemployment rates were already high and both of their national economies heavily rely on tourism. Officials say the EU as a whole will have to face enormous economic losses in 2020 before rebounding around 6% next year. Chang Tae-hyun, Arirang News.
The COVID-19 pandemic has swept every industry worldwide, and the automobile industry is no exception. Car factories have been forced to power down their production lines across the world, and the demand has also dried up, making the first quarter of this year one they'll all rather forget. But the second quarter looks to be just as bad, if not worse, than the first quarter. Our Kim Da-mi with the details.
Automakers across the globe had a rough first quarter because of the coronavirus crisis. General Motors' net profit plummeted almost 87% to around $294 million in the January to March period. The Detroit-based automaker did better than expected, but its revenue totaled around $33 billion during the same period, down more than 6% on year. According to GM on Wednesday, figures in the second quarter are on track to be worse. GM plans to resume most of its North American plants on May 18th after shutting them in March over the virus. Fiat Chrysler will also restart U.S. production in 2 weeks after seeing a $1.8 billion loss in the first quarter. Its revenue also plummeted around 16% to just over $22 billion during the first 3 months of 2020. The pandemic hammered South Korean automakers last month. According to South Korea's Pyeongtaek Regional Office of Oceans and Fisheries, hundreds of thousands of cars are just sitting idle at ports waiting to be shipped. In fact, in April, Hyundai Motors' profits plunged more than 40% on-year in the first quarter. Sales and operating profit were up 5.6% and 4.7% respectively, but analysts say those gains came from the weaker Korean won. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
South Korea's current account surplus has grown in the month of March compared to the previous year. Preliminary data from the Bank of Korea showed this Thursday that the country's current account surplus in March was up near $1.2 billion on year, up $6.23 billion. Now, it is the 11th month in a row that the current account has been in the black. The goods account recorded a surplus of $7 billion, down from some $8.3 billion as exports fell more than imports amid the pandemic. Exports in March fell 3.3% on year, while imports fell 0.6%. The services account was still in the red, but the deficit narrowed from a year earlier. The BOK official added that the current account will likely post a deficit in April due to the full impact of the pandemic. The number of global COVID-19 cases has surpassed 3.7 million, and the death toll has topped 260,000 worldwide. Russia has been reporting over 10,000 new cases a day for the past 4 consecutive days, with its accumulated number of cases at over 165,000 as of Wednesday. And Russia's culture minister has also been diagnosed with the virus, the 4th top Russian official to have contracted the COVID-19. Over in Europe, the UK has now leapfrogged Italy to have the highest number of COVID-19 deaths in the region, with its death toll surpassing the 30,000 mark. And German Chancellor Angela Merkel said Wednesday that the country had passed the first phase of the pandemic and shops will begin to reopen. She explained that the public will be required to maintain social distancing until June 5th, but added that the country's football league, the Bundesliga, will start in mid-May, with no spectators, becoming Europe's first major league to resume. Shifting focus, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is continuing to blame China for keeping the truth about the origin of COVID-19 hidden from the rest of the world. But the Chinese Foreign Ministry refuted Pompeo and his comments and said that Beijing is opposed to a U.S. investigation being held for domestic political reason. Our Lee Sing-jae reports.
Speaking at a press conference in Washington on Wednesday, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo reaffirmed the U.S. has significant evidence the COVID-19 virus originated from a certain laboratory in the Chinese city of Wuhan.
We don't have certainty, and there is significant evidence that this came from the laboratory. Those statements can both be true.
2 laboratories were researching coronavirus in Wuhan, the epicenter of the outbreak, before the pandemic started. The theory that COVID-19 might have come from there was given further traction last week when President Trump suggested he was confident the Wuhan Institute of Virology was the origin. The WHO says it's waiting on an invitation from China to take part in its investigation into the animal origins of the virus that was first reported in Wuhan in December 2019. However, Beijing's UN ambassador in Geneva says Beijing's top priority is first beating the pandemic, then countering what he called an absurd and ridiculous accusation from the U.S. The Chinese Foreign Ministry also accused Washington of engaging what it called political manipulation.
We are opposed to individual politicians in the United States conducting investigations based on the presumption of guilt on China for domestic political reasons. We are opposed to using the epidemic to engage in political manipulation.
Beijing says President Trump and Pompeo's allegations about the source of the virus are simply them trying to shift responsibility over their failed response to the outbreak in the U.S. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korea's unification minister paid a visit to the inter-Korean border on Wednesday as questions continue to swirl over North Korea's recent shooting toward a South Korean guard post. Now, the ministry explained that the visit was aimed at monitoring the area before resuming to public tours, which have been halted since late last year following an outbreak of African swine fever. Our Kim Hyo-sun tells us more.
Seoul's unification minister Kim Yeon-chul visited the inter-Korean truce village on Wednesday, to which public tour programs have been suspended since last October due to the African swine fever outbreak across the country. He also visited the former site of a guard post in the border town of Paju, which was dismantled following the inter-Korean military agreement signed in September 2018. Among the guard posts that have been demolished, this is the only area available for public tour.
The quarantine authorities have decided on the guidelines, and with the minister's visit, we will soon have a definite date for the resumption of the tour schedule.
Once the country successfully overcomes the COVID-19 pandemic, Seoul will also begin its plan of transforming the DMZ into a peace zone. This is in line with the Panmunjom Declaration signed by the leaders of two Koreas 2 years ago. However, the minister's visit to the area sparked controversy as North Korea is staying silent regarding its shooting of a separate South Korean guard post located in the inter-Korean border on Sunday. To this, the unification minister explained the minister's visit was planned in advance. The South Korean military and intelligence agency also put more weight on the view that the incident was accidental. Regarding the shooting, the UN command explained Wednesday that it has launched an on-site investigation. It explained the findings will be provided to the South Korean government and parts will also be disclosed to the public. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
At the nation's parliament, South Korea's ruling Democratic Party will be selecting its new floor leader later this afternoon. At 2 p.m. Korea time, ruling party lawmakers will be casting their votes for the three candidates in the running. The candidates are the party's former policy chief Kim Tae-yeon, former top office senior secretary for civil affairs Chun Hae-chul, and four-term lawmaker Chung Sung-ho. Now, the winner will be replacing Lee In-young, whose term ends this Thursday. Now, the new leader will also be tasked to lead the party in its first year of the 21st National Assembly, which begins on May 30th. As people around the world use laptops more and more amid the social distancing and working from home, one leading U.S. consumer magazine gave its picks for the best laptops of this year. LG Gram by LG Electronics has been selected by Consumer Reports as one of the best laptops of the year. Now, the evaluators were particularly impressed by the 14-inch device and praised its high level of performance powered by an Intel Core i5 processor, despite the model weighing less than 1 kilogram. The magazine has previously picked LG Gram as its best laptop of 2019.
Good morning. We can expect a similar weather pattern today for most regions. It was a warm day here in Seoul on Wednesday, while eastern parts of the country had a cool day. Highs were in the upper teens, hovering about 5 degrees below the season norms, and it's going to be another cool day there. Bright sunlight to be with us all day, UV levels to be very high levels in many southern parts of the country as well as Jeju Island. But air quality will be normal to good nationwide. So when you're outside and there are not that many people around, why don't you take your face mask off and get some fresh air? Upper regions will be as warm as yesterday, but southern provinces will have similar to a few notches lower daytime highs. Busan just topping out at 19 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Much needed rainfall is in the forecast for Parents' Day tomorrow. Showers will linger into early Saturday. And that band of rain will bring seasonal temperatures too here in the capital. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for news around the world.
And that is where we leave things off for this edition of Arirang News. As always, thanks for watching.